stop and acknowledge that we have, as we were saying, quite a few friends from Saskatchewan. So Naomi Hunter is the leader of the Green Party of Saskatchewan, and I haven't been in a Zoom with her for a while. I have to say, I'm so that the Saskatchewan election happened in the midst of pandemic. We had a New Brunswick election and a British Columbia election during pandemic. I have to say, Naomi had the steepest hill to climb, and she was on her own in a car, sleeping in her car, and traveling the more remote and and enormous ridings of northern Saskatchewan. She left the other organizers to collect all the signatures for all the candidates for Regina and Saskatoon, and she went out on her own. So talk about being tough. That's quite the thing. It's a big country, but when you're thinking about trying to start organizing in New Brunswick and BC right now, in Prince Edward Island and in Ontario, and in Ottawa, where we have elected Greens, we've begun to build up something like some capacity. We've got staff, we've got people, we've got way more volunteers. So Naomi, just hats off to you and all the Saskatchewan Greens, to Larry and Larissa and Wendy. It's great to see how much progress you made in that election, even in a pandemic, and all the other challenges that you had to face, including Naomi sent me an email about how many people just slammed the door in her face, which I didn't share that with everybody at the time, but I thought, oh, it's a tough go. It's a tough go. A province that could elect Scott Moe with a majority. Well, never mind. Poor New Brunswick also had an election. At the first one, Blaine Higgs, of course, was the first political leader to figure he could roll the dice and have an election in a pandemic. Of course, when John Horgan did the same thing later in the fall, the COVID rates in British Columbia were 6 times higher than the COVID rates in New Brunswick when Blaine Higgs decided to try for an election. So elections are always on our minds as people who have to go figure out how to run an election campaign, how to run in a pandemic. And of course, the reason for John and the New Brunswick Southwest Greens having this webinar tonight is we could be in an election relatively soon.
Yes.
We don't know for sure. And I just want the rest of the people on this call, particularly if you're not from New Brunswick, you might not know how great the return was. New Brunswick Southwest with a candidate named Susan Jonah. What a great job you all did, because we had 49 ridings across Canada that broke 10% of the vote. I mean, to get 10% is a really important threshold, and of course that's where you get election returns, and Elections Canada sends the money back. That's right, I should do that too. That was a Yahoo moment. I like that there, John. Well, I'll add one for mine. It was to get 13% of the vote for New Brunswick Southwest was terrific. And I know that Susan Jonah, I know you're looking for a candidate this time around. She may not be able to run. I don't know exactly. I know she's got job commitments with being an elected council member, but I hope you've laid the groundwork for a really strong campaign, and that's what it takes in each campaign to do better than the last ones. And of course, we did better than we'd done before because, as you mentioned, Paul Manley is your next speaker coming up next month. Paul, of course, it was the second elected Green at the federal level, and he's been elected twice now, but what an exhausting year it was for him, because he first won May 5th, 2019 in the by-election, and then had to run again to win in the fall of 2019 in the general election. So Paul and his team really were, he'd also run in 2015 in Nanaimo Ladysmith, and was very, very popular and did well. So there's nothing like Greens for being persistent. Just keep at it. And certainly for the New Brunswick Greens, fantastic leadership from David Kuhn, great MLAs in Kevin Arsenault and Megan Mitten. And I think they've so impressed people across Canada. And of course, it was David Kuhn's win in Fredericton that laid the groundwork, and all the great volunteers in the Fredericton area for our big breakthrough to win a seat at the federal level, but outside of British Columbia. So Jenica Atwin winning in Fredericton has been a really big thing for Greens across Canada. So we look forward to in New Brunswick Southwest, what would it take to win the seat for next time? So I'm really in this kind of format. I would love to answer your questions for a while if you have questions, but I'll just say, of course, we've had a big transition since the election. As you know, I stepped down as leader, and I'm continuing. I will run again. I want to be reelected to Saanich-Gulf Islands. I can't believe well, I forgot to do my territorial acknowledgement. I can't believe it. I'm on the traditional territory of Wasanish people, Saanich Siem in Senchothan is Haishka Siem, which is to say welcome and thank you.
Yes.
The name of my riding, Saanich-Gulf Islands, the Saanich is the anglicized mispronunciation of the indigenous nation on whose territory I live. It's a fascinating place to live. I mean, a lot of you will know that I'm originally from Cape Breton Island, and I spent a lot of time in New Brunswick in the 1970s fighting budworm spraying with friends there from way back when. And then I teamed up with a lot of folks in New Brunswick to fight Point Lepreau, and that's when I first knew Janice Harvey. And then David moved to New Brunswick from Toronto, and David and Janice became two of my favorite friends in the world. But a lot of the work I've done over the years has been, environmental grassroots work. And that's how I know most of New Brunswick as well as I do is working in that territory. But I think we've got tremendous potential for winning seats right across Canada right now. Our leader, Annamie Paul, is doing a stellar job. I'm thrilled not to be leader anymore. As I said, I do want to be the member of parliament for Saanich-Gulf Islands again. I'll let you know. Next time around, I'd like to run to be Speaker of the House. So as long as we have enough seats that the new leader doesn't need me to make sure we don't lose a vote or carry a vote. But if the numbers are right, I'd like to try my hat in as Speaker of the House. But we're doing well, and we're getting stronger. And Annamie Paul has not yet announced which riding she will contest in the next federal election. But I think she has announced that it's going to be in Ontario. And I'm quite certain she'll win the seat she chooses in Ontario, which will then mean that we'll have elected Greens from New Brunswick, British Columbia, Ontario. And I really think it's time for some federal Greens from Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia. We see tremendous potential in Atlantic Canada. I don't know if the folks from New Brunswick on this call saw the most recent ECOS poll, which puts the Green Party in Atlantic Canada at about 22%. So you're doing awesome there in New Brunswick, and I think we need Jenica reelected, but we need a strong candidate for New Brunswick Southwest. As I said, you did an amazing job last year. So the big question before I turn it over to you for questions, because I'm sure someone's going to ask this, is when do we think the next election is going to be? Up until about a month ago, I was roughly 90% sure it would be this spring. But two things have happened that make me think it might not be to the fall or summer or fall. One is the arrival of these variants, which mean that we don't have COVID-19 under control the way we thought we did. It wasn't entirely in control, but we thought, in the fall, you could imagine the people in the Prime Minister's office thinking, okay, we've bent the curve, we've got this more or less under control, and now we got vaccines, we can have an election in the spring. Well, now vaccines are coming far too slowly, and there's glitches. But more significantly, there's the issue of these variants. So I don't think, who knows, but I now think it's more likely that we'll have a fall election than a spring election. But there's a lot of work to be done. We've got to, find our strong candidates, raise money for the campaigns, and make sure we're ready to roll whenever the writ does drop. There's some restructuring around Annamie's office, which I think will make us stronger in the campaign. We didn't do too badly for fundraising in 2020, considering we're in a pandemic. But there's real work to be done. Is the work we do. We do a lot of work in Parliament to try to get good programs and get help for people who need help. I don't know if you noticed in terms of acknowledging the work of parliamentarians. Jenica Atwin got a Parliamentarian of the Year award this year as the Rising Star. Now that's something, because that's a vote of all MPs. So I hope that's getting out there in New Brunswick, so people know when you elect a Green, you get some hardworking, strong, and ethical representation, whether in Fredericton or in Ottawa. It's a very good investment to invest in electing more Greens. And I can't wait for the day when we have some Saskatchewan Greens, Naomi. Just we'll be looking to you for help to make sure we have a strong slate of federal candidates through Saskatchewan. We will, of course, have candidates everywhere and in every riding, as always. But I think we're going to see a stronger national campaign, and we're learning from some of the mistakes that happen. You learn by making mistakes. So we had some good learning from the last election. We have by the way, there's a campaign debrief document for any of you who are really involved in campaigning. You'll want to look at it. It was shared with every member in December. If you can't find a copy of it in your inbox, let someone know and they'll send it to you. It's a very insightful, strong document from 3 academics who gave us advice, and some of that advice was around basically as leader of the party, I didn't actually have any control over anything, and the debrief report said, you might want to let your leader have some level of coordination over communications messages and that sort of thing. So that's where I'm saying there's some reorganization going around so that Annamie Paul will be better served in her time as leader. And I'm really looking forward to seeing a much stronger campaign. Anyway, and now that Bert's taking his camera on, hey Bert, good to see you again. So John, I'll turn it over to you now. I'm happy to take questions, or there is full warning to everyone. I think you've got the hint. There's a fundraising component to this here gathering, but I'll turn it back over to you, John.
Okay, well, thank you, Elizabeth. Before I go and give it over to people to go and ask questions, I have 2 questions of myself, and being that I am the host, I get the chance to ask the first questions. The reason why I am having this meeting is to get outreach and get people involved with the Green Party and get involved with the EDA. And what I wanted to know from you, and possibly the people in Saskatchewan might want to hear this as well, your remarks as well, is what is the Elizabeth, could you tell us what is the importance of the being involved with the Green Party, and with your experience with Sandwich, with your EDA, how is it important to become locally involved with your EDA and with the Green Party?
Well, yeah. So John, there's a couple of answers to that, I suppose. I mean, this is a time when a lot of people at the heart level feel a lot of maybe a deep sadness can set in, right? If you spend a lot of your time looking at climate science, you can become despairing. If you're looking around the world at COVID numbers, you think, oh gee, this is a tough time we're living through. And I think it's really, really important, whether looking at social problems or climate emergency, finding a way to make a difference is also really important for your own sense of well-being. And I don't know that you can make as big a difference anywhere as in growing the Green Party. We are able to make a really big difference for people, from everything from changing the wage subsidy to go from 10% to 75%. I mean, the NDP always take credit for everything, and we tend to not blow our own horn, but we did a lot of heavy lifting in Parliament to improve programs for people during COVID. We also made quite a big difference, I think, in public awareness and understanding around issues like climate, and particularly being there to continually push and hold the government to account for what is essentially right now a record of failure from the federal Liberals on climate. So putting your energies into something is always better than nothing. And given the range of options for the average citizen, I don't think there's any substitute for the kind of engagement you can have and the range of issues where you can feel you're making a difference, influencing policy, because the Green Party of Canada isn't driven by the leader. Leader doesn't just wake up one morning and say, I think I'll change our policy. What we advocate for is what the party membership has voted on. So there's a lot of scope for making a difference in the Green Party. But for your question about my own riding and building on success, there's no question but that keeping people involved, building a local EDA, and I think you all know what that stands for, the Electoral District Association, which is Elections Canada language for what we used to call the riding. Being involved at the local level is a key factor in when you see that growth and that breakthrough of actually electing someone. So my EDA, I'm really blessed. When I first was nominated as a candidate, which was in 2009, we had about 200 members in our EDA. We've now got about 800 members in our EDA. And I know those numbers will sound big for New Brunswick Southwest or Regina, but it's doable. And one of the things that starts happening is my EDA has all kinds of when we're not in COVID, we have a lot of really fun social events. We have a lot of potlucks. We have done some Zoom parties to try to see each other's faces and stay involved. But volunteers are what makes the difference in winning a riding. And as I mentioned earlier, the David Coon's volunteers who helped get him elected in Fredericton were, of course, the same people who knocked on doors for Jenica. And the more people you have who are willing to go out and knock on doors, the more people you have willing to fill all the essential required spots on an electoral district association that Elections Canada wants to know, have signed up and are responsible for things like the financial affairs of the local association. All of those jobs are essential for the success of the Green Party. But I would say to the individuals who take those things on, as long as you can find a way to make it fun, there's just no more effective way to contribute to your kids' future, or if you don't have kids, your friends' kids' future. I mean, the future for endangered species, we're out there to make a real difference. And the more people who help us, the more effective we can be. And the more we can elect more Greens, which is, I think, what we all want to see happen, is elect more Greens. And then we can make the difference that the planet needs and that Canadians need. John, you're on mute now.
Oh, okay, there we go. Yes, I had Election Canada actually call me this afternoon saying that they're making up their list already and wanted to check my contacts. And as I say, here in our riding, provincially and federally, we keep on electing the Liberals, it would be elected Liberal. We would elect the Liberal, that person would run. Then we would, next election, we would switch, elect a Conservative. Next election, we'd elect a Liberal. How do we go and change that and start electing Greens?
Well, I say we learn from our mistakes. Maybe some people never do. But if you've been voting Liberal all your life and you don't get the representation you like,
Yes.
if you vote Conservative all your life and you don't like the representation you got, time to really think about a change.
Yes.
And I think the performance isn't necessarily a good word. The track record. When you look at a track record of someone like Jenica Atwin,
Yes.
how does that compare to a track record of a John Williamson? Well, it's not comparable. People are really proud of Jenica. And I think the more that people look at what elected Greens can do, they're proud of Megan and Kevin and David Coon. I forget when David was elected. It was right, maybe 6 months after I was in Fredericton for something, and I was doing a media interview. So a reporter said something to me that he didn't want his listeners to hear, because after all, reporters can't show any partisanship, but it was such a good line. And he said, a lot of people are glad David Kuhn got elected. He said, our legislature really needed an integrity transfusion. And I figure if we could let people know across the country, you elect Greens, your democracy everywhere benefits from an integrity transfusion. We make a difference even when we're not forming government. And oh, hello, Stephanie. Lovely to see you.
Hi,
So
Elizabeth.
yeah, Stephanie, of course, just to say hello, shout out. I think you all know Stephanie Coburn is the elected federal council representative for New Brunswick on the party's federal council, which is the entity that really runs the party. And Stephanie, we're being joined here. She has to leave soon, but I want to introduce you to Naomi Hunter. If you don't know Naomi, she's leader of the Green Party of Saskatchewan. I won't introduce everyone because I know Naomi just sent a note. Yeah. So yeah, it's Stephanie is part of what runs the party. I used to be on federal council as leader, and now Annemie Paul is there, so I don't get to see Stephanie quite as much. So was that an okay answer to that question, John?
Yes, it was.
Bye,
Yes.
Naomi. See you later.
Nice seeing you. Okay, well, I would like to open it up to questions and let people ask their own questions. I don't know if you go to your the bottom of their screen, there's a you can click on participants. If you go and do that, there is a symbol there for raising your hand. And if you want to ask a question, you can just go and click on raise hand, and I will acknowledge you and let you ask your question. You can all go and unmute yourself. Dirk, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, both to do with how inclusive the party is. One of the questions being, is there a party policy on small nuclear reactors?
Yes, there is. Where the party policy as I said, the party policies are developed by the membership, and they oppose nuclear power. We've been working with a number of Greens in Fredericton area who are very concerned about this proposal for small modular reactors. I could go on and lecture on why we're against small modular reactors, but that is our policy.
Okay, very good. The other one is the policy on the Israeli government and their treatment of the Palestinians in their country, or in their area.
Yeah, well, I'll just tell you one thing before I answer the question in terms of our policy. It was really amazing for me after the 2019 election. I've worked quite a lot with the Palestinian Authority in Ottawa, and I was last parliamentary session on the executive. Well, I helped restart something called the Canada-Palestinian Parliamentary Friendship Group, and we organized a tour through the occupied territories for 18 members of parliament representing all the parties in parliament, and it was the first connection to the Palestinians from any parliamentary group for at least a decade. But one of the things I felt, it was because of that I was invited to a farewell dinner of the Palestinian community in Ottawa for not just Ottawa, people came in from all over, for the ambassador from the Palestinian Authority to Canada. And I was astonished that when I walked in the room, there was this huge standing ovation. And I asked, well, good heavens, what's that for? And they said, well, you're the first leader of any federal party ever to stand up for Palestinian rights in a leaders' debate. And I'd actually forgotten I did it, right? It slipped my mind that in the Maclean's debate Andrew Scheer had gone after the Liberals for restoring funding to the UN Works Agency, which is the only funder for education and healthcare and everything in what are still called refugee camps, but they've been there 75 years. Anyway, but back to our party policy, which was passed by members in 2016, and it's a consensus policy, and it's quite strong in calling for a two-state solution, but also condemning Israeli excesses and maltreatment of Palestinians, standing up for Palestinian human rights. So we have the strongest policy of any party in the country, for sure. And both Paul Manley and I have been active on this. I stepped off the executive of the Canada-Palestinian Parliamentary Friendship Group so that Paul could sit on the executive, but I'm still a member. So we have a very strong record, and it's one of those issues that came up a lot in the leadership debate. And I have to say, some of the detractors, particularly some of my detractors, absolutely mischaracterized what our position was and continue to do so. But I'm really happy to set the record straight. I'm really proud of our record in being very clear that we respect and support the right of the Israeli state to exist. We support the right of Israelis to live in peace and dignity, but we likewise support the rights of Palestinians to live in peace and dignity. And we unequivocally condemn the illegal settlements that Israel keeps building, seizing Palestinian land illegally.
Okay, very good. What was the controversy of, I don't know how many years ago now, with you and the being connected with a pro-Israel group? Something like that.
I don't know anything about that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
No,
okay, so I'll tell you, Dirk, I don't know if I've got the way I communicate all messed up or what, but I get accused of being a Zionist and I get accused of being an anti-Semite. Depends on who you're listening to. Some of the folks around some groups have just made stuff up. I've never been part of any Zionist group. I'm not part of any controversial group, except I guess the Canada-Palestinian Parliamentary Friendship Group, but we're part of the Parliament of Canada, and we support Palestinian rights and try to counterbalance particularly in the Harper years, Canada had a position that was more pro Netanyahu than people in Israel. So I always try to distinguish between the support for the state of Israel, which we do as Greens, and support for Netanyahu, which we absolutely don't, because and we do have a Green Party in Israel. They're not right now in Knesset. Stav Shafir, who's leader of the Green Party of Israel, lost her seat in 2020. I don't know if they'll be able to regain a seat in Knesset. The elections are happening right now. They're happening now as Netanyahu is facing criminal charges. We'll see. But if you ever find the detail on that, Dirk, of what it was I was alleged to belong to, send me an email and I'll let you know. But there isn't anything to it, is what I can tell you with the information we've got.
Okay.
Lots of hands up.
No.
Okay.
Also on the thing with the small nuclear plants, there's been a lot of groups out of Fredericton that have got given anybody a lot of information on the things on the nuclear power plant.
Well, I'm hoping to remind people when it comes up that this is something that a lot of Canadians don't know, because for so long, Atomic Energy of Canada Limited was a Crown corporation. And when we were fighting Point Lepreau or fighting Darlington, we were dealing with AECL, Atomic Energy of Canada Limited. Under Harper, AECL's assets got, for the most part, sold off. And they got sold off for cheap, bargain basement prices. So the wing of what used to be AECL that's promoting these so-called SMRs, which don't exist in real life, they only exist on paper, that got sold for chicken feed, I think for something like $17 million after the government of Canada, people of Canada, putting about $40 billion into it. That got sold to SNC-Lavalin. So the corporation that's behind pushing SMRs is SNC-Lavalin. And I'm not done with demanding that we get to the bottom of the SNC-Lavalin scandal that cost Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott their roles in the Trudeau cabinet.
Yes.
But I know there's a lot of questions, so I won't keep
Yeah.
going on that one.
Okay, Dirk, we'll have to let
Thank
you
you very
go. Mark, you had given me a question around a week ago, so I'll let you go next.
Good. Thanks, John. Hi, Elizabeth. Just, I've got a couple questions, but I'll start with this one. So Southwest New Brunswick, or Southwest NB, is a fairly rural riding with a lot of smaller communities. So in the transition to the green economy, I've sort of been a little bit involved with that over the last number of years. How should those small rural communities, or how can they, first of all, benefit from that transition? And how should they position themselves to take advantage of those opportunities as we transition? Oh, Elizabeth's on mute now.
Correct. This is what happens in Parliament all the time. We forget we're on mute. It's a great question, and it's really one that the New Brunswick Greens have down, I think, perfectly. But I've heard David Kuhn speak this so often about how New Brunswick is the right size as a province to make a really significant transition economically for the benefit of small and rural and local. So it comes down to thinking in terms of economic growth through a different lens. I think historically in the Maritimes, people think about economic growth as some big corporation coming in from away and opening a factory or something, or opening a sawmill or opening a pulp mill, or but for real sustainability and for resilience in face of the coming climate crisis, for strength in our economy, the more we do to support each other, the more that local businesses support other local businesses. One of the programs that will, in the post-carbon economy, that will create the most jobs the fastest right away is going to be around making our residential buildings more affordable. So if you don't have any home fuel costs at all, your life becomes a lot more affordable. And that's a function of making it an energy efficient house. That can include, if you're willing to really maximize insulation, you actually don't need a furnace anywhere. You can keep yourself warm through almost from the appliances within a house. At least that's what Amory Lovins has done in the example of the Rocky Mountain Institute. And he's in the mountains of Colorado, and they get a lot of snow and it gets really cold. So we know that you can, by retrofitting buildings, you can cut greenhouse gases, even if you don't go to zero heat source in the house, which a lot of people would have a hard time believing in New Brunswick, but you can actually you can slash your home heating costs and reduce greenhouse gases. And in the process, you're creating a lot of jobs, and they're local. So they're jobs for local carpenters, plumbers, electricians. It's money going into local lumber stores and hardware stores. And it's a very good job creation plan. And it's right across the country, but it's particularly of benefit, I think, in smaller rural communities where people are mostly own their own homes, whether inheriting them. There's more home ownership, but the burden of homes that are really inefficient and old, and or maybe conned at some point in our past into running electric baseboard, as opposed to insulating and making sure the house is benefiting from renewable energy. That's another aspect that we need to get into the budget. So the general ethic of Greens in localizing the economy, supporting each other locally, being resilient, and of course, what we've learned through COVID is that a lot of jobs can be done from home. And so if you can work from anywhere, I think it's also going to be a revolution in people. Once they realize they can do their job from anywhere, I think we might see people from big urban centers saying after COVID, I liked that Atlantic bubble. I kept wishing I was in it. So I think that may be a way that people, I saw, I'm sure you all saw on TV that the National, or was it the National, did a special on how Nova Scotia is promoting itself on this basis of remote work. And wouldn't you rather be working here? Of course, pictures of the Cabot Trail, but that's okay, than in an urban center. I think there's a lot to be said for if we can get high-speed internet cabling right through all of our more rural and remote areas. The economic viability and the economic picture changes from, okay, we cut down the trees, we feed them to a sawmill, and we let Irving take them away, to, okay, our economic sustainability is based on a quality of life, a creative class within the community, good schools, and natural beauty. And of course, we think as Greens, we'll keep fighting for guaranteed livable income, because a lot of people are going to be facing the automation and artificial intelligence. So we get out ahead of that. You can really see how it is a realistic economic picture for the future to build on our strengths, particularly across rural Canada.
Mark, that was good.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks. If I could do maybe just quickly one more, maybe. I don't think it's as long, because I think maybe you touched on a few of those things. And I'm glad you touched on high-speed internet too. I think obviously the whole, the fact that we're doing this over Zoom and all the rural communities, we really see how important that is. But I'm also involved, like within St. Andrews, they have an environmental advisory committee to the town. So I've gotten involved with that over the last little while. And they're doing some work through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, or some programs through that. But I'm wondering, as far as, again, small communities go, what other federal programs or federal pipelines should we be looking to tap into to assist, small communities in reducing their green or the carbon footprint?
Yeah, no, the FCM programs are fantastic. And it's a story just because it involves Louise Comeau, who lives outside Fredericton now. But when Louise and I were at Sierra Club, so how long ago now? It was the year of the big ice storm. So I think that was 2004, maybe. Anyway, we went in to see Paul Martin when he was, no, maybe 2003. He was Minister of Finance. And we talked him into giving a pot of money to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities so that they could run some climate programs. And that was given as a revolving grant. So that's why it's still working, and it's so great. So that is the best focused on municipalities so far. But as much as I've said that the federal Liberals are not doing a good job on climate, they are creating more and more programs all the time. So I'm hoping they're going to give more money to FCM, because I think FCM has proven itself to be an extremely professional partner, delivers good results, mobilizes. I mean, Harper relied on the municipalities after the 2008 financial crisis. It's just, the federal Conservatives couldn't say enough about realizing, oh gosh, if you want to make something work, hook up with the municipalities, and they're super smart. And that I wouldn't say, I mean, even though I mentioned we'd like to defeat John Williamson, he's an awfully nice guy. So, and if he's someone you can work with. So if St. Andrews goes to him and says, look, we haven't found enough programs that meet this that we want to do, ask him and his staff to work with you to see if you can find the very best programs that are tailor-made to what you need to do. The infrastructure programs within Catherine McKenna's office are another place to look. I've gotten some infrastructure money for my communities out here, and they're good programs. So find what you can to develop the infrastructure to have a low carbon and reduce costs for municipalities at the same time. It's a kind of a winning formula, and it helps educate people a lot when they see it working on the ground.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. I appreciate you taking the time tonight. I really do appreciate it.
No, it's fun. It's great.
Well, thank you, Mark. I believe Emerald had his hand up next.
Well, yeah, I was the first one to put it up, but
Must
there
be
are a
getting
few-
tired.
no.
Well,
My name ain't Granny Clampett.
Yeah, Emerald is our financial agent for the EDA. So he's been a great help.
There's a few things, Elizabeth, that I wanted to ask. One, very quickly, is there a term limit on the federal council?
Yes. Oh, yes. Everybody has to run for re-election. So the terms are 2-year terms. Yeah. So I don't know if Stephanie's running again this time. I think that is Stephanie, am I right? Are you one of the ones whose term's up this year?
It is, and I am not running again. And there is no term limit. Do you mean there's only a certain number of terms that someone can run? No.
Yeah. Like I know most nonprofits have a 3-year can
Yeah.
run 3 times, that's it.
Yeah, we
No,
don't have that.
That's right. We don't have that. We have, I said yes, but no, in that everybody has a term, but you can run again and again and again the way the current rules work.
Now, the second question, very quickly, is to answer, is regarding recycling programs. They vary from community to community, city to town, place to place. Here, I have to separate my plastics, my cans, and my cardboard. In Sussex, about an hour, 15 minutes away from me, they recycle their wet garbage, their paper products. You know, it seems like there's no genuine straight recycling program, and there's a way if we could get people to start recycling some of that stuff, especially like coffee grounds. Don't throw them out there in the summer. If you anthill outside, put them on the anthill. The ants like it. But it's
Well,
there a possibility of setting a national
yeah. Well, national programs are hard to do once you're getting into provincial jurisdiction. So you could say the federal government should set up standards. Now, the federal government is getting involved in plastics because of the crisis of ocean plastics. But the question of recycling, I mean, we're still dealing with some of the government of Canada still exports plastics that we shouldn't export under the Basel Convention, because we're not actually exporting them for recycling, we're exporting them for dumping. So it can be a complicated question. I think we need a lot more public education. As you say, you don't need a municipally funded pickup of organic material to reduce greenhouse gases by especially in a rural communities, starting your own compost and just saying, even if you don't have a garden, a lot of people don't realize that even if they're not gardening, composting organic materials at home in the backyard is going to reduce greenhouse gases versus putting them in a garbage bag for someone to take away, because locked in that garbage bag, they're going to produce a lot of methane. Whereas, put in a backyard and turned over and with lots of access to oxygen, they are not going to be producing methane. So that's an education effort, but there isn't any way to have the federal government dictate every community has this kind of recycling and that kind of recycling. So it means, as you said, just from where you are in Hoyt to all the way up to Sussex, not a big difference, but you've got all the difference in the world in terms of what the rules are for what you separate and what gets picked up.
Yeah, and the other question, the last one I had was regarding the Canada Pension Plan disability. I applied for it and was denied at the tribunal stage. And I thought the tribunal was 3 or so people that would basically, one would have medical knowledge about the issue that was affecting me, and the other 2 would be people with medical information. I have one person, that was it. She made the decision, denied me. And I didn't realize until after the fact that the people feeding her information was a lawyer telling her, this can't happen, this can't happen. It wasn't fair. I thought that, how would the party handle something like this? Because it's not fair that there's a lawyer saying, you can't do this, you must deny it for these reasons.
Well, I guess the way the party policy would deal with that, of course, is calling for guaranteed livable income. So it wouldn't have people. And we know that people with disabilities have a vastly higher level of poverty and economic difficulties. I would say in your case, thinking like an MP, I don't know how long ago the refusal happened, but I'd take the case and ask John Williamson's staff to start working on it and get it reversed. A lot of people don't know how much an MP can do for their constituents. And regardless of whether you voted for the person or not, and that's what I always tell my constituents, I don't care if you voted green or not, I work for you. What's the problem? And we dig in and we work on it. And so I've worked for a lot of veterans to get pensions when they've been denied. Sometimes it'll be a case of over 10 years. I had one veteran, I got his pension sorted out, and his workplace injury had been in the 1990s. So you'd be amazed sometimes if you get good staff in an MP's office. Now, if they can't help you, if they don't give you any help, call me and I'll try to get my office staff to do it. But I do this far too much,
Okay.
so we end up helping people who are not constituents, but they're somewhere else in the country. So try your own MP first. Maybe then the closest MP to try if John Williamson can't take it on would be Jenica. But I bet he'll help. This is one of the secret things about being a member of parliament, which I'll share with all of you because it shouldn't be a secret. You know how ever since Stephen Harper created Service Canada means there's no service. So there's a centralized call center and you wait on the phone. You know, you want to call about your pension, you want to call about unemployment insurance. It's all to the same call center and no one ever answers the phones. So here's the secret. Members of parliament get phone lines and phone numbers that somebody answers. So that's for immigration, for refugee issues, for passports, for all kinds of stuff that constituents are frustrated out of their minds because they've waited on hold for a government phone line to be answered. You can spend 6-7 hours, no one's answering. So if you call your member of parliament and say, look, I need to know what's going on with my son-in-law's permanent residency status. We've been waiting for years and now we're still told, my daughter's still told she has to wait to find out if her husband's a permanent resident or not. There's a million of these issues that come up all the time. And members of parliament, actually, that's our job. So, you know, give that a try and try to reverse that decision because it doesn't sound fair to me either.
No, and I didn't think it was fair. I'm applying now for the second time, and now they're denying me because I've been on Canada Pension Plan for 16 months.
Mhm.
And I says, but I told them in the appeal, I said, that shouldn't matter in this case. I said, you've got to go back to the try.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Well,
you.
try all the details, take all the details to your local MP.
Yes.
and see about what you know. That's part of his job. You can tell him I sent you.
Okay, thank you, Emerald. So as you have to plug your nose and phone John Williamson. Jeff Strong, you're next. You're from BC.
Yeah. Elizabeth, I want to know, how do you ensure that Green candidates coming up are familiar with, you know, all of the issues or the key issues, particularly something like climate change? They need to know something beyond that greenhouse gases cause warming.
Yeah, well, it's a good question, Jeff. What we do is we have a candidate application process, and I'm hoping that they'll fix the current form. They just try to draft one, and Stephanie, I don't know if you've got complaints. It left out some key things like do you know our policies? But what we have done in every election up till now since 2011 was 2008 we didn't have this. 2011, 2015, 2019 we said, look, you have to tell us that you're familiar with our policies. Now that's a different thing than saying can you in a debate explain climate science, but let's just say the first step is, have you read our policies? And then tell us any policies with which you disagree. That's not to say, because we're a grassroots party and we don't say you must agree with all of our policies or you can't run. I mean, I don't agree with all of our policies. For example, the one I don't agree with is we adopted a policy that we should have an elected Senate. And I've got some problems with that, but it's not a big enough problem that I can't be a Green Party representative. But you declare where you disagree. We have policies on just about everything. So there's room for people to say, I mean, there's room for people to run for us who, for instance, might think nuclear power was okay because the climate crisis is so extreme. I know scientists who think that. We just don't want them to make it a single issue campaign on one thing on which they disagree with us. So anyway, that's the way we do it, is to say, are you familiar with our policies? You've read the policies. Tell us anything about that you will disagree on. Then once they're candidates, there are fact kits, there's efforts at training. They're mostly online, but I have to say I'm awfully proud of the caliber of candidates we've had. We've had such strong people coast to coast to coast who they've got when they go into debates, they've got Vision Green, they've got the platform, they've got background and help to answer questions. So and they also know that our goal as a party is that our candidates are always honest. So the advice we always give people as candidates is don't bluff. Don't give an answer if you don't know the answer. Say, look, I'll go check and I'll get back to you. And I hope I can find someone who can explain it better than I can. So we want people who are truly and authentically themselves and who share that with voters, because that's what I think voters want, is to know that the person they're voting for is honest and ethical, not just reading stuff off a page, but actually working hard to understand it. And on that score, I tell you, I would put our slate of Green candidates up against any other party for really being knowledgeable. I think we have a higher quality of knowledgeable folks than any other party.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
By the way, Jeff is also a climate scientist, so he knows whereof he speaks. Thanks, Larry. Good to have seen you. He's leaving.
Oh, okay, Larissa, you're next. You had a question.
Yeah, and here I'll lower my hand so it's not distracting. And I want to keep this very specific to New Brunswick because I really appreciate the chance to get to meet some New Brunswick Greens and that you have an election potentially that you're preparing for. My question for Elizabeth is, how important do you think it is to be concentrating efforts of volunteers in order to get Greens elected? And I remember working on your campaigns when you were first elected, and it was really a national effort. So I think from my perspective, it's really important. And I think it's something we struggle with in Saskatchewan, like that our wonderful leader Naomi had to be in other ridings during the provincial election, for example, to helping other candidates. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that in order to get people there.
Well, I think it's a little less of a problem as time goes by, but you're right. Now, when I ran in the first federal campaign I ran in 2008, I mean, as leader of the party, the first time I ran, the federal party strategy had not decided that it was a priority for me to be elected. And the people running the campaign were quite sure that our better chance was in Guelph than where I was running in Nova Scotia. So they had me out of my more than half of the time. And after that, then the council rethought it and said, okay, we should make it a priority. And a lot of people thought that meant that my riding got lots of money. Well, during the writ period, at least, we didn't get any money from out of the riding. But you're right, people were encouraged phone into Elizabeth's riding. For me, the biggest thing that made the difference for getting elected in Saanich-Gulf Islands was I was in my riding. I did a lot of campaigning outside the riding, of course. I did a leaders tour across the country in 2011. But I was in my own riding more than half the time. And that makes a big difference. I didn't miss any of the all candidate debates in 2011. And there were 13 of them. And people forget at the time I was running against a federal cabinet member, a member of Stephen Harper's cabinet. So, and he'd been there for 14 years. So nobody within the community, there was, it was uphill. But once we got through that, we didn't concentrate. Again, 2015 and 2019, I was out of my riding more than half the time. So it's kind of now in this next election campaign, I'm not on Annemie Paul's strategic team for how to run the election. I hope I'll get in some committee at some point on election planning. But my hunch is that she'll know, and her advisors will tell her, to win a riding where we've never had a Green elected in Ontario at the federal level, you better be there all the time, starting immediately. Once she declares where she's running, she won't be in as good a position to travel the country. And that's why I've volunteered that I can do that again, because I want to make sure, I mean, I won't be leader, obviously, but there's a benefit to having a former leader supporting a new leader so that we can get good crowds out. People will feel supported, because Annemie has to carry her own riding, and I know she will, which will be a breakthrough for us in Ontario. But I think assuming COVID allows it, I'll be traveling to support her. So again, the bigger question, if I take it to a more of an abstract level, Larissa, is do we have to concentrate? Somewhat. I mean, there's 338 ridings in Canada. We can't put equal effort into 338 ridings and elect anyone. But my own view is that we should be thinking big in this election. We should be thinking about not putting a limit on how many candidates can win. And I think where we have local volunteers and, like what John's doing tonight to get more people in New Brunswick Southwest thinking about it. Who's going to run? Who's the candidate? And I love that the challenge campaign to recruit candidates that Anime and the team just put out. We're looking for a strong team across Canada, and certainly a riding like New Brunswick Southwest that got 13% of the vote in the last election is in a very good position to say, well, hey, look at us, and this is our candidate this time, and we'd like to make sure that we get a visit from the leader, or we get some additional help with our campaign. There's that kind of concentration, but not one or two ridings. This time around, we should be looking at, I'm not going to put a number on it because Anime won't, but we really do need to elect a lot more MPs this time around. And I think every time that we go out and elect people, it reduces the psychological barrier that voters have that you can't elect Greens, right? We just need to keep electing more and more and more. And people say, oh yeah, right. I think that was one of our big victories, by the way, was when Anime was elected leader. The national media coverage, I almost fell off my chair the first time I heard it, but then everybody said it over and over again. Anime Paul, they said, made history as the first Black woman ever to lead a, wait for it, major national political party. It was the first time we'd ever been called a major national political party, and all of the media said it. It was CBC News, it was CTV News, it was Global News, it was, everybody said, right, she's the first Black woman leader of a major national political party. That is one of those things. For me, it was like a sonic boom that broke the sound barrier. It's like, oh my God. It's about time.
Okay, Len O'Brien, you had your hand up, but you put your hand down. Do you still want to go and ask the question?
Thank you. And sorry, my camera is not operating on this device, so I can't see, you can't see me like I can see all of you. My question probably was more provincially angled. And then as I was listening a little bit more, I kind of thought it's probably not fitting in this scenario.
Len, where are you? Are you in New Brunswick?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. And, I can try to field a question that's more provincial, but if you think it's probably not one that I can take on.
I'll throw it out there just because you might have a couple minutes or whatever. Just I was really interested in the idea of retrofitting and, doing those kinds of things. But I was just on another call and had a big, long conversation about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the struggle really, New Brunswick is kind of, 50 or so % functionally illiterate. And I find communications to be difficult, not to mention senior folks that are here, and the levels of poverty, I guess, if you will, and those kinds of things. But so we were talking about there's 39,000 folks in the province that are on oil as heat, and there's residential homes in the province. So we're kind of talking about, okay, well, that's however many, thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of liters of oil that we go through every year for those 40,000 homes, costs X amount. And how do you communicate, or where is the data to actually show the difference to saying, okay, well, if you add 12 inches of insulation to your ceiling and we caulk all of your windows and replace the leaky ones and whatever that's there and put in a heat pump instead of running for oil, you're going to save $740 a year.
Yeah.
Or
Well, you're
and you
right.
could get off of oil, or you know what I'm saying, that kind of thing. The struggle is to get actual data that can be explained and numbers that can be explained in a simple way to get folks to go, oh yeah, well, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is there's a lot of, one of the places where we've got a lot of data actually comes from what Mark was talking about earlier from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities programs that have been going now for decades. Now, of course, they're geared to municipal buildings where you can say, okay, put in a heat pump or put in extra insulation, and this municipality saved X millions of dollars. I think now that we finally got, I mean, we went through from 2006 till this year, basically, with no federal program well, that's not quite right, 2006. They extended it for a while. Harper extended it for a while. But the eco-energy retrofit programs for homes got cut under Harper and they weren't restarted. I talked to Bill Morneau before his first budget in 2016, and I said, I hope you go back and look at the 2005 budget that Ralph Goodale brought out, and there was money for eco-energy retrofits, blah, blah. And I explained it all to him. He said, oh, that's just the beginning of what we're going to do. We're going to do way more than that. And it took me a while to realize he'd never read the 2005 budget. He didn't know what I was talking about. And he just, so we now have, for the first time in a decade or more, we now have federal programs to encourage home retrofits to save energy. Now, will they explain them well? There's a good question. They're new. We just had a whack of them announced December 11th of 2020 for new climate plans. We're going to see a lot. I think we'll see a lot more whenever Chrystia Freeland reads the new budget, where I'm just finishing the Green Party's pre-budget submission now, but a lot mean going through the fall economic statement and the climate. It's not really a climate plan. The Liberals call it a climate plan from December. There's a lot of new money for retrofitting homes. So then the question is, how do we get that communication out to people? And maybe that's a job for Green Party folks in every part of the country to understand what your citizenry will look for, to make sure it's graphic and easily available. Maybe Stephanie, your hand's up. Do you know has Conservation Council already done this?
I'm thinking that Efficiency New Brunswick has that data, and the person to call there is Jess Villivan. She would have some of those numbers for you then.
Okay.
At Efficiency New Brunswick.
Thank
In the provincial side. I mean, that's aside from what Elizabeth is talking about federally.
But it makes it makes sense now as I think about it, Stephanie, now that we're, if we could think about, once we see what programs are available as a public service, maybe we could get the national office people, if they have time, to make some really easy English and French communication tools for voters and not everybody owns their own home. Not everybody can pick up on being able to use the ability to retrofit, but it's a huge winner of a way to reduce greenhouse gases and employ loads of people. And I'm really pleased to see that in the federal plans so far extend beyond home retrofits to looking at institutions, because you look at universities, schools, and hospitals, and they're carrying costs around energy. They're also extending to commercial buildings. So this is really important to attack the whole built infrastructure of Canada and get it to be consistent with zero carbon.
Are these programs,
One of the
Len,
I just wanted to say, one of the problems specifically in New Brunswick, I don't know if this is true all over the country, is that for instance, for schools, the Department of Education mandates the building of a school, but it's the Department of Transportation that builds the building, and they're two silos and they don't talk to each other. And the charges, the heating charges for that school go to the Department of Education, but the Department of Transportation has no interest in making those bills lower.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That's
Okay.
amazing.
Okay.
One last question, if I may.
Okay, one more. That's
Those federal
big short.
dollars and federal programs, do they go directly to individual citizens in a province, or does all of those funds end up funneling into the province, where the province then doles out the way they determine how that money is supposed to be doled out?
Now that depends on the program, but for eco-energy retrofits, and I'm making the assumption from the way I've read the announcement, it isn't really up and running yet, that it's designed around the way the last one worked, and the last one went to individual homeowners, right?
Awesome.
And
Okay, thank you.
individual, and that's the best way. I mean, for sure.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Okay. I have one more hand up. Bert Fulkins. Bert Fulkins is our member at large for our EDA. And Bert, do you have a question?
Hi, Elizabeth. How are you?
Good, Bert. It's been too long. Good to see you.
Oh, it's been a while. Just two quick questions related to the COVID situation that we have going on around the world right now. It's basically taken a pandemic for the governments to decide they're going to find a cure for this, or let's put it this way, a solution for this problem, okay? What's it going to take to find a solution to climate change? What has to happen where governments will put in billions of dollars and effort?
Yeah.
And the other related thing is that the government has basically had a program called CERB, okay, for most people to tap into. Is that anywhere near, the discussion was going on to a guaranteed livable income. Is there any likelihood that the government will see this as an ongoing program that they could turn into a GLI?
Well, those are great questions. The first one is I'll answer the last one first. There's more acceptance and support for guaranteed livable income now than any time I've ever seen ever. I mean, it's been Green Party policy from before I became leader, so it dates way back. And we've every year we put it in our platform. Every year we talk about it. But this is the first time I've heard the NDPers talk about it. The majority of the Liberal caucus, on a vote that they took, the majority of the backbenchers said this would be the issue they want to see pursued, is guaranteed livable income. So I think if you ask, is the government saying that yet? No. Are there a lot of even cabinet ministers who think this is the direction they should go? Yes. So then the other question is, how do we get them to realize the climate emergency is actually a much bigger threat than the COVID emergency? On the climate emergency, they still act as if we're talking about an environmental issue. A COVID emergency is all hands on deck, whole of government response. And I think one of the big differences in terms, I keep trying to figure out what's wrong. This is going to sound funny, but I keep trying to figure out what's wrong with the Liberals that they don't get it. And I don't think it's oil industry lobbying. I really think they've got a mental block on this. And I think the mental block is that they think climate is an environmental issue. And I think what's going to make them realize that they've got it wrong, and I never thought this would happen, is the Biden administration is going to show them up.
Mhm. Yes.
So we've got Joe Biden appointing John Kerry. Of course, John Kerry was Secretary of State under Obama. It was John Kerry who shut down Keystone based on evidence, right? And now John Kerry isn't there as head of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. John Kerry is there as the climate envoy on the president's National Security Council. So Biden has said really, really clearly, climate is a security threat. And his strategic advisor on security is John Kerry. His head of the EPA is also a different person. He's put his science advisor inside cabinet. So he's taken a different approach altogether. Whether that will impact the strong level of cognitive dissonance that the Liberals are able to exert, I mean, I don't know, but they don't get it yet. We declared a climate emergency in Parliament June of 2019. It was really because Paul Manly got elected. Paul Manly won in Nanaimo Ladysmith in May 2019. The media asked Justin Trudeau what that meant. He said, I guess it means people in Nanaimo Ladysmith really care about climate. Within 10 days, the Liberals put forward a resolution that climate was an emergency. We didn't vote on it till late June. We voted June 18th, and the debate and the vote that night, I was the only leader in Parliament. So you think, well, where were the rest of them if they think this is an emergency? Well, Jagmeet Singh and Andrew Scheer and Justin Trudeau were all at a big rally in Toronto to celebrate the Raptors win. So do they think it's an emergency? No. Do they act like it's an emergency? The next day they confirmed they were buying the pipeline. They know it's important. Now that's a distinction. They know it's important, but they don't have it at anywhere near the scale of importance of COVID. Convincing them that COVID is a Sunday school picnic compared to the climate crisis, I don't know. I don't know if you noticed, it didn't get a lot of coverage in Canada, but oh my God, when I saw that glacier collapse in India and knock out 2 major hydro dams as if they were, kids' sandcastles, losing glaciers of the Himalayas. If we lose the 3rd pole, which is the ice on top of the Himalayas, that's the 7 major rivers of Asia with potentially just going dry. We're not paying attention to screaming warning signs, like the polar vortex that made, like you guys got a huge storm, but the polar vortex is sitting on the prairies. It's like -40 in Manitoba. It's -12 in the Arctic. Normally this time of year would be between -30 to -37 in the Arctic Circle, but it's -12. Well, that's a 20-degree difference. It's because because we've messed up our climate cycles, and our climate systems and things like the jet stream are so affected by a melting Arctic that we get the polar vortex. The media doesn't even comment on what's happening in the Arctic being so much warmer. They talk about we've got this deep freeze over so much of Canada because of the polar vortex. Why did that happen? You might want to ask Ian Hanuman-Singh and Sandy Ronaldo. Could you put something on the air, please, to explain? Is there a relationship between the climate crisis and the polar vortex? I mean, there's so many ways in which we're let down by our media in understanding that this emergency is a constant daily event, and we need to take it much more seriously.
Hey, Bert.
Thank you.
Jeff.
Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So does anybody else have any other questions? Nobody?
So we have to start fundraising, John,
Yeah.
before you lose everybody.
Yeah. Well, the only other question that I have, as I say, we have a few people from outside the province, and we, as I say, we're starting to grow this EDA, and just was wondering if anyone else from Saskatchewan or BC would like to comment on what you're doing out with your EDAs.
Well, I'm a monthly giver anyway. So.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yes.
Now, Larissa's been a candidate in the past, and Wendy, you're in Saskatchewan too, aren't you? Are you active in your EDA these days, Larissa? I don't know.
I've been so busy with grad school lately. I finished my master's and started my PhD this fall, so I haven't been, but I'm feeling inspired to be. So Larry
I just saw that.
He dropped off because Larry is very involved.
Yes.
I just saw the PhD thesis in the chat. Congratulations, Larissa. Sorry, Wendy, what were you saying?
Thank you.
Well, I have been involved in our EDA, but I've had to step back for a little bit.
Well, EDA work is so hard. I have to say, I mean, depending on where you are in the country, when you have to fill out all those Elections Canada forms and there's more of a workload there than people know. That my financial agent is still getting questions from last year. They're awfully creative. They just wrote him and said, you live in this is a rural riding. Why is there nothing there for accommodation expenses? And I'm thinking, gee whiz. I mean, but anyway, it's good. They're going everything with a fine-tooth comb. But my financial agent is an 83-year-old volunteer, and I feel terrible every time he gets another whack of questions from Elections Canada. So the workload for our volunteers across the country in keeping electoral district association executives together, it's essential work. I mean, not in the sense of COVID essential work, but it is for the party's growth. It is, I think we don't do nearly enough to thank you who take on the positions within EDAs. It's really, it takes time, and it's exacting, and you have to deal with Elections Canada officials. And then locally, you have to keep trying to figure out getting people to come to volunteer events and being ready and being organized and finding the candidates and raising the money. It's hard work, and it usually falls on a couple of the same people, depending on the community, over and over again. So it's really, really appreciate, Emerald, you taking on the FA, and John being CEO, and Bert being a member at large. I'm not sure how many of the rest of you on this call are actually in the EDA and doing the work, but it's really essential and very, very much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, Elizabeth, you were asking that we should be getting to it. And I will let you do what you do best. We're going to be trying something different this time.
Yeah, I'm not, let's hope I do it. What we're doing is we're going to try to do on Zoom what we call a Dutch auction when we do it in person, which is to ask for money as fast as possible, starting at the highest level that you're allowed to give, and trying really hard to make it go fast so nobody feels awkward about nobody giving any money at high levels. That's basically the thing, because we can start at the level that we're allowed to give this year, which I think it went up to, what's 1,600 and something, isn't it, John?
It's 1650.
So that's the highest individual level allowed to give to the party. And I know you were going to try
It
something.
went up $50.
So it's 1650 is the maximum you can give.
Yes. So
and
you want to start with that?
Sure, and then we'll go right down to whatever you
Okay.
have on the screen.
Bert, did you have a question?
No, I was just trying to lower my hand.
Okay.
You're putting your hand up to
There we go.
donate 1650.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, that's
There
I
right.
was
we go.
making sure I got that in there.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll start with this.
So, okay. So what would you do? All right. So would you be willing to? And it goes directly to this EDA. And so after your tax rebate, your tax credit, if you're a taxpayer, it would cost you $1,000 to donate 1,650.
Yes.
So host is sharing poll results. So this is a poll. Okay.
Yes. So basically, you if you want to donate 1650, just say yes, I would. If you want to do it monthly, click on that. When after the meeting is done, we will get a report and with your name and email address, and we will contact you with the details. So I'm have this up, and
that's it. Going.
John,
let's try the next one.
Okay. And
sorry,
nothing.
It's okay. What's the next number we're going to try for?
The next number. Okay. How do I go and? Oh, something's wrong here. How?
Yes, I noticed you put up the results instead of the actual survey for people to check on.
Yes. Okay. Here we go for 1,000.
Good. So $1,000 will cost you after your tax credit. That'll be a $442 donation to give $1,000 to New Brunswick Southwest Greens, which would be fantastic. Anybody willing to do that? You can check the box. And anybody, I'm just looking here if I can.
Going once.
Going once, going twice, $1,000 for the New Brunswick Southwest Greens. Okay, going twice. Let's try the next level.
Okay. Next level, 750.
Okay, now 750 after taxes is going to cost you, where did it go?
$275.
Okay, Anybody for this bargain. Now we're down to $275 to give that money to the Greens of New Brunswick Southwest.
And you can do that monthly, $65 monthly.
And I'm looking, I've lost it on my screen. I did something funny, John. I don't know where it went,
Oh,
but that's okay.
okay.
It's okay if everybody else can see. Oh, there it is.
Yes,
Okay, good.
yes.
All right, so that would be $475. So your cost of the donation would be $275. Well, that's pretty good, gotta
Yes.
say.
Going.
Go. Okay, let's try the next level. See how we're doing.
Okay, we're getting.
The good thing about this auction, I just want to mention, it's very green. You don't have to take anything home.
Yes.
You don't get stuck with furniture you didn't want. So
Okay,
$500 New Brunswick Southwest Greens will give you a tax credit. So your cost of your donation is $150. Anybody willing to give $500 New Brunswick Southwest Greens? And it's an election year. They're going to need the
Yes.
money.
Yes. We need the money to go and run candidate for the fourth Green MP.
Now I'm going to ask you something, John. Is the next slide $400?
I think 200.
Oh no, I want to do 400. So I'm going to, so without a slide, $400 is your primo tax point. $400
No,
you get.
we do have 400.
Okay, put it up. That's the best one. $400 will cost you 100. So I'm going to donate 400. Anybody else? Because that one after taxes, that's a $100 cost if you pay taxes. That's a 75% rebate. Anybody else? Okay, let's try your next one down, John. At least you got something there.
Yeah,
I'll have to write you. I'll mail you the check.
Actually, we got two. We have one who is willing to do it monthly. So
fantastic.
35.
Is that you guys? Can we thank you? Is that Mark and Allison?
Well,
yay! Thank you.
Well, the whole thing with this is privacy, so nobody really knows who did this.
Well, except I just thanked them out loud in front of everybody.
Okay. And we have $200.
After okay, $200. The cost of your donation is $50 after you get your, and of course this is the 2021 tax year, but that's pretty good. $200 New Brunswick Southwest Greens. Your cost of donation is $50.
Yes, and we had one person.
Oh, that's fantastic!
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
So if my math is right, we're up to $800, up to $900.
Yes.
No, $1,000.
No.
Two 400s and a 200.
And the last is $100.
And again, this is a 75% rebate, so your donation costs $25.
Two.
Fantastic.
Yes. And we're going to end this, and nobody else. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, that's certainly, I hope that was painless.
Yes.
Certainly, it helps the coffers of New Brunswick Southwest Greens. Fantastic.
Okay.
And if you want to do it by e-transfer, you can do it on the website for the party. Or if you want to do it by e-transfer, email transfer, my party address, you don't have to do a password, just send it there by email transfer and it goes right into the bank account. I only get notification.
Okay.
I will go and look at the report and send everyone a email thanking them and with details of what they should go and do.
Thank you, John. That'll be really helpful.
And I'd like
how much was our total? That was pretty good.
Yeah, I think it would be $800, $900.
Oh no, it's more than that.
I'd have to take
more than that.
Yeah,
I think it was.
I'll take a look at it and I will report back to you. I'd like to thank you, Elizabeth, for coming tonight and share.
Thank you, John, for all you do.
and sharing with us. And I'd like to thank everyone from New Brunswick who's come and showed up as part of the EDA. And I give a shout out to those in Saskatchewan and BC and Ontario. We welcome you and as fellow Greens. And actually I'm from Kitchener, Ontario. 12 years ago, we moved out here to New Brunswick. So I take a look at the weather map and see the big weather fronts crossing the Great Lakes. And I said, oh, I'm glad I'm not there anymore.
Well, we did. Honestly, Kitchener Center was one of our big successes last year. We're going to build on that, get Mike Morris elected next time. I think he was at something like 30%. Mike Morris did a spectacular job in Kitchener Center. So I appreciate all of you being here today, and thank you for inviting me, John. And good to hang out with all of you on Zoom.
Okay.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Stephanie. Good to see you.
Okay.
Take care now, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
And we'll send you all notification of our next meeting.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Elizabeth.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everybody.
All right,
Bye.
thank
so
you.
much.
Bye.
Wonderful to meet everyone. Bye.
Bye, Larissa.
I'll send you a picture,
Bye,
Elizabeth, to
So
let
good
me
to
remember
see
you.
you.